Well, howdy there, folks. This is your host, ID Jester. Welcome back to our World Campaign Creation for Beginners tutorial video series. Thank you so much for joining me. So this is part 2, and we're going to be talking about Unique World. So if you're still with me on this video series, then I didn't scare you off after basically giving you the lowdown information from last episode, where it was all doom and gloom about world creation, about how your life will be changed forever because you will be spending all of your waking hours working on your special world. But what I didn't mention in the previous episode is world campaign creation can be one of the funnest, most enjoyable things that you will ever do. It's kind of like painting a painting or building a house. As you progress through the years, you're going to see your envisionment starting to come to life. It's going to slowly but surely take step by step, put brick by brick, and eventually you're going to see walls put up. You're going to see the enjoyment of creating this wonderful masterpiece along the way. So, although it is a lot of work and effort, a lot of people, including myself, find world campaign creation very satisfying, very enjoyable, it is time consuming, and it is very a lot of work, but it is also very enjoyable if you like to create things out of nothing, especially something out of your imagination. So with that said, we're going to get into part 2, and we're going to be talking about a unique world. So last episode, in part 1, we talked about the fact that 8 or 10 years ago, when they were coming out with 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons, they decided, Wizards of the Coast, decided that they were going to add a brand new gaming world for all the players out there, because they hadn't done that in a long time, and so they basically asked people to submit their worlds, and I think they had, from what I remember, and this might not be correct, but I think they had 10,000 world submissions in the beginning part, and it was limited to a one-page explanation of your world. And from there, they kind of narrowed it down, and they decided to go with the world of Eberron, as we know. So, my thing for you to think about, for you world campaign creators out there, is, before I give you my answer, why did they choose Eberron? What do you think the reasoning behind Eberron is? And I think the reason behind their choice for Eberron is because it was different and unique from Faerun, the Forgotten Realms, which was kind of their other base world creation setting that they had been working with. Eberron and Faerun are totally different. Their histories, their what makes up the world, how the world was created, everything, the god pantheons is different. The fact that there are races, warforged and shifters in Eberron, it made it a unique world that was not basically going to be a reskin of Forgotten Realms or the world of Faerun. So, when we're talking about world campaign creation, we're going to be talking about a unique world that is all to your own. So, when we start this process here in part 2, we're going to think big first. We're going to think world big. And what that means is we're going to think about all the things that will affect everyone and everything. So things such as the environment, the way people live, things that affect everything in your world. What is going to make your world unique and different based upon the things that you're going to alter that are going to affect everyone and everything? So when we start looking at unique worlds out there, we're going to be talking about the mechanics behind the world that is going to make it unique and interesting. So that's the goal of this episode here. So to give you some thoughts and some background about what exactly we're talking about when we're talking about making a world unique and interesting. We're talking about, say, for example, Star Wars. What separates the world of Star Wars from every other fantasy sci-fi world out there? Well, they had the Force. That is kind of their unique answer to magic, sort of say. We look at Pandora, the world of Pandora there from the movie Avatar. We have natural beings bound by a magical essence. Mad Max, a world plunged into madness for water and fuel. Think about other worlds out there. Skyrim, the world from the Half-Life series, Resident Evil, Warcraft, and Witcher worlds. One thing that separates all of these worlds from one another is that they are all unique and different, and they basically have some kind of mechanic in the world that makes it unique and interesting. So, we're talking about unique and interesting. We're talking about not just taking names of peoples and places based upon other worlds. We're talking about what makes your world different. Again, the reason they chose Eberron over the other 10,000 submissions to their to create a brand new world for the Dungeons and Dragons licensed world was the fact that it was unique and different. It wasn't just a reskin of something else somebody else had already created. It wasn't the world of Faerun basically thrown into a different timeline that has the same makeup. It's different and unique, and that's what I want. If you're going to be spending all of this time and effort making a world, you're not going to hopefully be satisfied with creating something that just is a reskin of another world out there. Your world should have something unique and different. So we're talking about something unique and different. These are the things that really kind of separate worlds between one another when we're talking about specifically a fantasy setting. Again, if you look back at the Star Wars, the Pandora, the Mad Max, Skyrim, Half-Life, Resident Evil, Warcraft, Witcher, just any fantasy world that you can think of out there, they're all separated by something that makes it unique and different and interesting. Now, these are some of the aspects that I want you to think about that's going to make your world unique and different. Well, first, there's magic. Obviously, being magic is embedded into Dungeons and Dragons, and it's going to be embedded into world creation. In fact, we're going to be having a specific episode on magic, so I'm not going to get too much into it right now. But magic and Dungeons and Dragons goes hand in hand, and how you change or alter magic in your world can make or break the outcome of how successful it is. The other one that's kind of very big on the list, obviously, and is highlighted in red because we're going to have a special episode talking about gods. Your god pantheons. Let me tell you, as we've gone through this series, I've talked about my world of Neramos and the many thousands of hours I spent creating and working on it. It's actually been probably 3 or 4 years since I've actually spent any time on it, just because, as we mentioned in the first episode, it takes a lot of time and effort and a lot of dedication to keep it going. And when you don't have players playing in it, and you don't have people that are being characters in a campaign in it and such, it kind of can take second or third or fourth place in your hierarchy of importance and importantness. So that's kind of where I'm sitting at right now. I haven't had a face-to-face group in a while, and a lot of the online stuff that I'm doing right now I'm not doing with Neramos, but that might change here soon. But anyways, gods, again, is highlighted in red because we're going to be talking about gods in depth in probably another episode. And the reason I started going off on this tangent is because When I was creating my world of Neremos, I restricted my gods. Basically, I was using the default gods out of the D&D Pantheon, and then I switched them over to the Faerun gods, because gods is actually creating a god pantheon and stuff was such an involved process and such took such a huge amount of time, and we're going to go through that in another episode. So be prepared that some of these things are going to take some getting used to. So we're looking for things that are going to make your world unique and different. So you can keep the magic is the same. You can maybe keep the gods as the same. Another choice, you can use some or all of these things, is the history of the world. If we're talking about history of the world, you might be talking about something like, say, Lord of the Rings type things, where, certain things that had happened in the history can make your world that much different than every other world out there that is being created. And along with the history, obviously, you're going to have very important events and such that will alter your world and make it different than every other world out there. But some of the best ideas for creating a new and interesting world is for you to create something new. So we have new ideas, and these things tend to be the biggest changes to worlds. That's going to make them stick out so much different. Again, if we just look at Star Wars, having the Force in there makes it a very unique setting based upon all or a lot of the other sci-fi series out there. So we're talking about new ideas. We're talking about maybe new monsters. Are these monsters good? Are they bad? Are they very, very powerful? Do they have special powers? Is there some that are good? Is there some that are bad? Is there one specific one that has some special power? In my world of Neremos, there are several different kinds of new monsters, and we'll get to that when we specifically talk later on in this series about that. But new ideas bring the biggest changes to the worlds. Alright, so another thing that can do this is a new kind of resource. Is there something new and interesting to your world that can make it different? Is it some kind of a resource, or maybe some kind of a substance that maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, maybe it's very rare, maybe it's affecting people somehow? All of these things are going to change your world to other worlds based upon your addition of these new kinds of resources or substances. Is there a new way of living? For example, underground. Are people only living underground? Maybe they only live in the sky. Maybe they only live in the water. The only limitation is your imagination when we're talking about what can be created in a fantasy world. That's why it's basically called a fantasy world, because it's not based on reality, it's based on fantasy. So if you have all of your people living in the sky and they use sky ships or flying ships to get between places, your fantasy world is going to be a lot different than other people's fantasy worlds. Speaking of which, we're also talking about new features, unique features. Maybe your fantasy world has floating islands, or flying ships, or underwater submarines, or some kind of a way to traverse underwater. Unique features that are going to separate your world from other worlds. So, now that you've had some ideas and thoughts about what creates a unique world, and you have some, hopefully you're getting your creative juices flowing and you're starting to maybe take some notes and think about things, and I would highly recommend you do that. Just get a notepad or Word or whatever, and just start jotting down some notes about things that might make your world unique and different than other worlds. Think about other interesting worlds that you know about, or if there's computer games you play about, maybe there are some worlds in there that you know of, and hopefully you'll begin to think of different things that are going to make your world unique and interesting. But along with that comes now one of the most important things. How are these unique and different things going to affect the world, and how is it going to be played with your new and unique ideas that you are putting into your fantasy world? So things you have to think about are, with these new additions or subtractions to your fantasy world, how is that going to change the rules for the game? Is it going to include additional rules, or are you going to get rid of some of the game rules? Are you going to have to change some of the game rules? How does all of these new and unique things that you're adding to your world, how are they going to change the rules of the game? And remember last episode when I said, okay, you want to create a new fantasy world. You want to create something of your own. You want to create something that's unique and different than everything else out there. And I said, fine, you're going to lose half the players that might be interested in playing with you just because of that. And these are the reasons why, is because when you start adding in new and interesting ideas that you have, or you start adding in some new monsters or new resources, new way of doing things, new features, you're going to be changing the game rules. And a lot of people don't like that. They want the game rules the way they've always known them. They always have played them the same way. And a lot of players do not want to have additional things. Now, I'm not saying everybody, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying a lot of people will not want to play a homebrewed world because they don't want to have to learn a whole bunch of new rules. They don't want to worry about Part 2 here, which is character restrictions or additions or changes. Let's say I want to play a wizard class, but in your fantasy world that you've been spending hundreds of hours working on, you have wizards that are only bad or only evil that are wizards are in your world. So I can't be a wizard. Well, guess what? I move on and I go to another gaming group, or I go on to another online group or whatever, because of the restrictions you have. So think about that. When you add things to the world to make it unique and different, it might going to change how characters are restricted, or there will be additional rules to it or additional changes. Again, a lot of players don't like to learn new things to a gaming system that's already kind of complex. They don't want to have additions. They don't want to have to learn new rules about magic and stuff like that. Not saying everybody, I'm just saying some people out there do not like doing that, and that's why you'll find it harder to actually find players that will work and want to play in your world. Now, some people love that kind of stuff. I personally, I love that kind of stuff, and I look for new additions to make it unique and different and interesting. Other things you have to think about when you're making changes to the world that's going to make it unique is, how does this affect travel? How does this affect different locations? How does it affect the different kingdoms in your world? How did this actually affect the world events in your world? All of these additions and subtractions. And I want to show you a few examples of what I have to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about here in a minute. How do these things that you had added or subtracted from the world, how did that affect the world's history? If you don't have any dwarves in your fantasy world, again, if I wanted to play a dwarf character, boom, well, I guess I'm going to go have to find somebody else to play with. But let's say I'm not worried about not playing a dwarf. I'll play something else because I want to try out your world. But how does these other things, how does it affect the world's history? Is there anything that can change or alter the things that you've added to your world? If you add the fact that maybe there are only bad wizards in your world, and everybody hates magic and is afraid of it, and is there anything that can change or alter that? Is there maybe a way of getting a player to get in the game that wants to play a wizard, And maybe there's a way for them to kind of change or alter these additions. But that's things you will have to think about based upon what your unique and your unique thing about your world. How does these things affect the player characters? So how are these things that you're going to make changes to, how are they going to affect the player characters? And that kind of goes along with number 7, which is how much is known by the player characters. Do they have to learn this? Do they have to experience? Do they have to read about it? Or do they know all of the information? So kind of number 6 and number 7 goes together there. So how are the players' characters going to know about this? Is this something that, okay, everybody knows there are flying islands and there are flying ships in your world or whatever? That's pretty easy to understand. But if you add in a unique feature that says that there are certain areas of your world that magic is changed or altered in some way or in some fashion, do the player characters know this information? Do they have to find it out as they are adventuring? Can they learn it through quests? How are the changes going to affect the player characters and the people that are going to run these characters throughout your campaign? Just remember that every single thing that you add or subtract from an adventure is something your players are going to have to learn about. Having players understand your gaming world and the background and the history and the gods and the location and the events and everything else is a huge undertaking. To get people just to know 1/10 of what you know is a huge undertaking. Let me tell you from experience. And we're going to show you that in the next episode when we talk about information overload. So this is going to be even more information overload when we're talking about things that are added or changed in the world than players are expecting. This is another thing that the players are going to have to learn about. They're going to have to change the rules of their characters or the restrictions or how it affects other things in the world. They're going to have to learn all of this information. So now I'm going to go ahead and just show you what I have for my world of Neramus. Now remember, I've been working on this probably for, like I said, about 15 years or so. And some of this stuff has come up just by doing some adventures and campaigns, and then I thought, oh, this would be a really good idea to add into the world. One of the campaigns, I had the players come across something that was never there before, and I thought, wow, this is great. I should add this into my world as a permanent thing, as a permanent history and stuff. So some of these features have been added throughout the years and stuff, and I don't expect your worlds to really have as much as I've got as far as changes and alterations. But I kind of want to give you a little bit about exactly what we're talking about when we're looking at game changes and how it affects the players. So in the world of Neremos, there are the 10 truths, and that's what makes it an exciting and adventurous world, and these are the things that separate this world from many other Dungeons & Dragons worlds. So it's basically the 10 truths. There are 10 things that I've altered in the world of Neremos. Some of these are major changes, some are minor changes. And some of these have very big consequences and other things not so much. But it's all things that I have to explain to my players. It's all things that they have to learn about. It's all things that they have to deal with if they want to game in the world of Neremos. So the first thing, and this is kind of just an easy one, is the history, or as a matter of fact, the lack of history. So no one talks about the past. No one can remember the past. So it's very unknown what had happened in the past, and there's a lot of text and all this, blah, blah, blah. But there's also a game mechanic that's based upon this. Because of this fact, characters cannot be trained in history. They're not allowed to gain a bonus to their history They are allowed to gain bonuses to their history knowledge through feats, backgrounds, powers, magical items, etc., but no character can be trained in history. So there is a game mechanic because I had changed the information that, okay, characters can know the skill of history, and I basically have changed that rule, and there is a consequence for changing that rule. Here's another one. Number 2 is lifeblood. So we talked about kind of something about this earlier when we talked about is there any kind of new resource or substance that is good or bad. So lifeblood is something that the players will figure out. It's basically a dark green liquid which is kind of like lava. It's got a magical essence to it, and players can use it to their advantage. And then because of this, there are history and kingdoms that have gone to war for this. There are people realize that lifeblood here can be a valuable resource to their kingdom, and so they'll fight over different territories where the lifeblood is found, and so it has a great importance. Just by adding this one new feature into my world, it quickly changed a lot of the background history and stuff, which I had to re-edit and redo, which was fine because I thought it was definitely worth that. So now it has a huge game importance here, where basically the player characters can use this as a basically a bonus that they're going to get to their damage and their attacks and everything like that if they dip their armor or weapons into lifeblood, etc., etc. The next thing is Blood Moon. So, unbeknownst to you, the world of Neramos has a moon called Lysis, and it basically rotates around just like our moon here on Earth does. But because of the world of Saruman, and we'll get to that here in a minute, later on down there, every what is it? 3 weeks, I think it is. Every 3 weeks, the world of Saruman reflects back onto the blood moon from the sun. Or every 3 weeks, the reflection of Saruman reflects from the sun onto Lysis and causes it to become a blood moon. And it has huge game consequences as well. That certain things will happen during the blood moon, and certain things will, take place during a blood moon time. So this is actually, kind of very important. That the players will then learn about Lysis and the moon rotation, and they will going to know. They're going to keep track because they're going to want to know when the blood moon is going to happen because of the game mechanic where certain things are going to happen based upon were creatures and lycanthropes. And when we talked earlier about, scroll back up here, when we talked about new ideas, the biggest change in the world, as I mentioned, then I have actually had new monsters. One of the new monsters in my campaign or my world creation are called Wolfins, and you can understand that during the blood moon and what Wolfins kind of are. Another idea is that got put into is God touched. I'm not going to get into the gods too much because we're going to have a specific episode just on gods, but gods are very important to how everything was created and how everything was done in the history of Neramos and everything. And basically a god touched is somebody that is a direct descendant from one of the good gods on Neramos. And there's a lot of other information in here, yada yada yada. And of course this all has consequences as well, that if one of my players is god touched, which means he is a direct descendant of one of the good gods, then he is going to get some kind of special bonus and slight penalty, which is going to alter his the way he can play his character and how things happen with that character. So again, there's another reason that gods are important and the history of the gods and how they interact with the actual world. We also have Hell Sent, which is basically referring to kind of the opposite of God Touched, in that the Hell Sent are basically powerful demons that have led massive armies of Dark Ones that caused a great war across the world of Neramos. And of course, these are going to be these are going to have direct consequences, and there's no mechanical other than the Health Synth will be more powerful demons than normally found, and they'll come with special powers, especially during the Blood Moon time. So again, another reason why the players are going to really be involved in the world and keeping track of the moon and all that, because of all of these other game mechanics that are in there. Speaking of which, we also have the Day of the Shadow. So every third cycle of the moon, or every 21 days, an event happens that has profound consequences upon the lands of Neramos. The world of Saruman travels across the daytime sky in a direct line between the sun and Neramos, causing the whole mortal world to be cast in a darkened shroud. Blah, 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 blah. And of course, it has some game mechanics here where we have Day of the Shadow. All creatures of evil alignment gain some skills, gain some extra bonuses, and yada, yada, yada. So another reason why the players... And even though there are 10 things on the list, a couple of these things are kind of interrelated back and forth, as you can see. We also have shadow-scarred areas. This is basically the evil area, kind of in Neramos. It does have some consequences, and of course we've been mentioning this a few times throughout the world. We have basically the world of Neramos, but it's the world of Neramos in the Shadowfell. So that is another realm of existence out there. But in my campaign, or my world creation, the world of the Shadowfell has actually lost the world of Saruman and has come back and is now hovering, kind of rotating around as a moon. But it's actually a dark world of Neramos. So basically, it's a world of Neramos in the Shadowfell that is now rotating outside of the actual world of Neramos, that people can see it up in the sky. And of course, there may or may not be any mechanic specifically, but it will alter how things are played out in the world of Neramos. Teleportation is unstable. Blah blah blah, for reasons and everything, and what this game mechanic means. So players need to understand that because of the arrival of Saruman, and for those of you who are wondering, Saruman is basically, since it's the world of the Shadowfell, which is kind of the darkness of the light. The world of Neramos is in the light, the world of Saruman is in the dark. Basically, Saruman is Neramos spelled backwards. I don't know how many of you caught that, but it's basically the anti-world spelled Neramos spelled backward. Anyways, teleportation is unstable, and that's a direct reason why, is because of the tear in the Shadowfell that caused the world of Saruman to come back in. So if players use any kind of teleportation spell, you can see there are some consequences, that there is going to be a mischance, and blah blah blah, and that's kind of the game mechanic behind it. And finally, and lastly here, there are creatures and things known as wanderers in the world of Neramos, and basically whenever anyone dies, they are basically thrust into the plains, and their souls are floating around waiting to be escorted into one of the good realms or one of the evil realms, and there are basically two gods vying for these souls. There is Velimir and Velastic, and each of these, one is on the good side, one is on the evil side, and depending on which one of these gods finds that soul first determines what happens with that soul. Obviously, if Vostok finds it first, it is going to take the soul to the outer depth planes. Or I'm sorry, Valamir is the god of undead. Yeah, so Valamir, if he finds one or the other. Anyways, depending on which one of these gods, I'm trying to remember which one's which. One of them actually takes the soul to the good plane, one takes it to the evil plane, and then how does that play in with players? Well, there's a big consequence if characters ever die in the campaign. They have a chance. They have to roll a 20-sided dice or whatever to find out exactly what is going to happen with your soul based upon the mechanic of the Wanderers. You can be lost out there for many, many years. So basically, you're going to have to roll up a new character. You can be found by the evil god, and you can come back to Neramos as an undead evil creature, blah, 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 based upon what happens to that soul as it's found out in the Never Realms. So that's kind of what I have so far, or not so far, but during my time there with my world creation. You can see lots of different events and different things that are going to make the world of Neramos a much different place to game than a lot of other fantasy settings. So things to think about. There are some really easy changes that you can make. The fact that there is teleportation is unstable. Or maybe there is pixie dust in your world, or there is I'm just trying to think of just something off the top of my head. Maybe there's a powerful sea creature, so there are no ships in your world because no one's willing to go in the ocean because of these powerful sea creatures. Whatever. They can be as little game-changing as just restricting some skills to players, or they can be as big and altering as something as such as Lifeblood that actually will cause kingdoms to go to war because it's so powerful. It is one of the most rare and unique resources on the world, and it comes and it goes, and as it comes and goes, kingdoms crumble and fall as the lifeblood of the world comes. So you can have major life-altering, history-altering event things that's going to make your world unique and different. You could add in, blood moon for whatever reason. Maybe you have two moons, and when they overlap one another, it's called a blood moon, and something happens. So, something easy, something, something world-altering, and something, that the players, like the God Touched, where it's something they may or may not even experience based upon the chance of them actually being a direct descendant of the gods, and which god it is can alter, what they can or cannot do, or it might not even come into play at all if they are not a direct descendant of one of the good gods. Okay, so hopefully that gives you some really good information about unique worlds and why you want to create something that's going to be different and unique. You don't want to just a rehash of a already, you don't want to take the world of Eberron and just change it a little bit to suit your needs, or the world of Faerun and change it a little bit and add in your own kind of history and stuff. I mean, you can do that if you want, but that's not really world creation. Basically, you are just world editing at that point, which is a viable option. Many players do that as well. They create their own history for the world of Eberron and the world of Faerun, and I have also done that. In fact, when I first started my world of Neramos, a lot of it was based upon those two worlds, and a lot of those two worlds stayed in my world for the longest time, and a lot of these things will probably stay in your world as well until you have a chance to basically get around to making the changes. Like I said, some of these things, like the God's history, because it was such a mammoth undertaking, I kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And then finally, through basically my players asking questions and trying to figure out things, and we just, the fact that we didn't understand the gods from Faerun that much, and all the different gods, and we just had as many problems with them as we would. I just decided to make my own. For you, I mean, you could just say, okay, there's two gods. There's one good god and there's an evil god, and it's as simple as that. Or you could make it as in depth and as interesting as you want. And like I said, we'll probably get around to magic and gods eventually when we start looking at specifics about a unique world and what you're going to be creating. So hopefully this helps you think about a lot of things. Again, thinking is a lot of world creation, is thinking about things and deciding how is it going to, if I change this, how is that going to affect my world, my characters? How is it going to affect the players? Maybe all of the changes you add or subtract to the world aren't going to affect your players at all. Maybe it's just things that are going to be in the world that are going to make it different. Obviously, these are the easiest things to add. The things that are going to alter the game mechanics, the things that are going to restrict or change or alter character creation, are obviously going to be the most complex things. So think about that when you decide about what you're going to add to your fantasy world to make it unique and different. Well, thanks a lot for watching. Be sure to leave your thoughts, comments, suggestions below, and we will see you in the next part where we continue our look at world campaign creation. Until then, take care.